Hey everyone, and welcome back to Yellow Card TCG. It is me once again, Toku, with another video mocking the format. No, I'm kidding. This time it's a bit of a more serious, informative one. I'm bringing us back to the overExplained series because Bastion, our favorite preschooler who can only count to 3, has a new form in Bastion Accord, which not only provides our front row grade 3 rearguards with resist and a permanent 5k buff, but also let us restem without discard, all raw upgrades, without needing to drive check a grade 3 as well. There's a lot of good stuff in this one card, but he also has Duma VTech. In today's overExplained for Bastion Accord, I'll be going through multiple variations of the deck, card choices and card non-choices. I'll talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of each of the cards that I talk about in each of the decks that I show, and I'll give my opinions on which one is the best that one should consider bringing to future events, and lastly, I'll also give you some gameplay insights onto how to play the deck going into this very explosive format. First of all, let's get the non-choices out of the way. Bastion Accord, though an amazing card by itself, does not function without its rearguards. You could call this a rearguard-centric deck, which uses the rearguards to win. These 20 cards that I have shown here are 20 mandatory cards that you will see in every Bastion Accord deck, no exceptions. Except maybe the primes in another variant, which we will talk about later. I'm not super fond of it though. I think you should just max out on primes. We have some familiar faces in Alden and Prime, and some new faces in Accord, Grander Edge, and Sapient Owl. Let's introduce to you our new friends. Firstly, Bastion Accord. Continuous on the Vanguard Circle, this unit is also regarded as Apex Ruler Bastion. This effect lets you Persona ride between the old Bastion and itself, but most importantly, you'll be running this one in the ride line to keep Rooks Draw 1 live. Also continuous on the Vanguard Circle, all of your grade 3 or greater front row rearguards cannot be chosen by opponent's card effects and get 5k power. This is also active on your opponent's turn. So, this effect means riding this will OTK Seraph. Not only does the resist help maintain board presence, but the 5k buff permanently also makes attacking into your rearguards really hard too. This then becomes plussing to board and hand, as we don't need to replace our attackers and thus can keep extra copies as shield or discard fodder for PGs. Then an auto skill. At the end of the battle this unit attacked, choose one of your grade 3 or less rearguards, stand it, and if your opponent's vanguard is grade 3 or greater, that rearguard gets the red text once per turn. When this unit attacks, pay the cost to counterblast 1 and discard a Bastion named card from hand to perform drive checks until the end of the battle. With this effect, though you don't give the 10k buff that Apex Ruler Bastion does, the permanent 5k buff on a restander amounts to the same power distribution. What's important here is that A, you don't need to drive check a grade 3, and B, you don't need to discard. As we enter this explosive format, and as we are in a very trigger dense format as well, you are going to need all the hand you can get and all the triggers you can get to guard with. So, being able to restand after double triggering to attempt to drive check 2 more triggers is fine and dandy. Next up, we have probably the simplest Unga Bunga Faces the Place card I have ever seen, my beloved Grander Edge Dragon. I love this card so much. Every night, I go to sleep and pray to whichever god is listening that I always open 2 Grander Edge Dragons. Has a continuous effect in hand that when revealing for your card effect, be it Fort or be it Rooks, this card is treated as 2 grade 3s. Literally only for the aforementioned rhyme line effects to try and get pluses. This does alleviate your hand and mulligan decisions, however, as you will then be able to keep more defensive pieces if you have Grander and another grade 3. It also lets you hide information, such as not needing to reveal Alden. Also a continuous effect on the rearguard circle and the guardian circle. If you have a Bastion named Vanguard, yeah, that's the condition. This unit gains 10k power and shield. Permanent. That's it. You are a 23k body on board permanently. Combine this with Accord, and you are a 20k body on board with resist permanently. Unless your opponent has non-targeting removal, this is always putting on damage pressure, and that's fucking awesome. The 10k shield also means that extra copies are not bricks and can be used to make up for the missing guard value that the deck had a glaring weakness for due to the lack of grade 1s and 2s. Finally, the glue that puts this deck all together. Sapient Owl. Continuous on the rear, hand, and trigger zone. during your turn if you have a Vanguard with Bastion in its name. This card gets +2 grade, becoming a grade 3, and power +2k, becoming 10k. It's just so good. It's just so good. It's a grade 3 with 5k shield, first of all. It's a 10k booster that is able to get restood with Prime to boost once again, so you get 2 boosts out of it. It also gets the 10k power buff from Prime. It's also a grade 3 to reveal as you go from grades 2 to grade 3 for Rooks, and it's also a grade 1 that you can call from Alden from Ham, but then it's treated as a grade 3 on board, so you still get to draw 2. The second effect is an auto effect when placed on the rearguard circle if your Vanguard is Bastion. Put a grade 3 or greater card from drop into soul and choose one of your Vanguards, and it gains 5k until the end of turn. If a card with Bastion was put in as cost and you did not countercharge this turn, countercharge 1. Provides soul charge and provides countercharge that this deck needs between Accord and Alden. The 5k is also very helpful, as the weakest column before attacks would tend to be our Vanguard column, but this boosting any Bastion becomes 28k before Persona rides. That's 2 triggers, 30k shield for a 1 pass. The 2 remaining cards which I deem are mandatory to Bastion is his best friend Alden. I think it's kind of romantic and beautiful that Alden has been with Bastion since set 1. From the deck's highs and the deck's lows, Alden is the MVP. From being a draw source, a reliable attacker, I don't see Alden leaving the deck anytime soon. The other mandatory card, I believe, is Bastion Prime. I think Bastion Prime is the perfect finisher for the deck. Whether it be the unrealistic turn 4 or turn 5, once you've burned all your counterblast, burned all of your Bastion names, but thanks to Accord, your board is still safe. Rewriting into Prime and going for 5 attacks can close out the game safely. In turns prior to that, he's not even a break because he is a Bastion name to discard, and also a Bastion name and drop to soul in with Owl to countercharge. These are the 5 cards that I deem are mandatory to be run in an Accord deck, and mandatory to run at 4. If you disagree with this, feel free to let me know down in the comments, share your opinions, but also know that you are wrong, didn't ask, don't care, you're white, skill issue, touch grass, you have negative social credits, L ratio plus. With the mandatory cards out of the way, I'm going to introduce some non-mandatory cards that you can use to fill out the rest of the deck after your ride line and your triggers. First for discussion and a large point of contention is Sajess. Rear guard circle, if your opponent's drive or damage check reveal the trigger, this unit gets 10k power and 10k shield. Auto on the rear circle, once per turn. When this unit attacks, look at the top card of your deck and leave it on top or put it into soul. Then you can counterblast 1 and perform all of the following. Choose one of your opponent's 14k or greater Vanguards and increase this unit's power by that unit's power until end of battle. Also, paying the cost to remove the overtrigger from your drop zone, buff one of your other front row units by 15k until the end of turn. Personally, I really like Sajess and think he should be a mainstay in the deck while the game is dominated by who flips more yellow cards. That's us. Having an extra 10k shield to live or being able to match your opponent's defensive triggers, including Accord's 5k buff, makes Sajess a trigger to guard through defensive triggers. I also really appreciate the information Sajess gives, be it attacking before or after the Vanguard swing. You can glean info about your first drive check or your first damage check. I rarely use the counterblast effect as the deck has better uses for a counterblast, but it does come up. Next up, we have Form Up, O Chosen Knights. Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1 to perform all the effects below according to the number of your grade 3 units. If you have 2 or more, choose one of your units and it gets 5k until end of turn. Ho hum. 3 or more, draw a card. Neurons activated. 4 or more, choose one of your Vanguards and it gets drive +1 until end of turn. Hog. In today's format and the foreseeable future, drive checks are broken because drive checking triggers is broken. The more triggers you drive check, the more you win. So turning a turn 3 Accord into triple drive or a turn 4 Accord into penta drive means you see more of your deck, you see more triggers, you gain more shield, your chance to live increases and your chance to kill increases. Before, you would have issues maintaining the 4 or more units on board due to the matchups that would spot remove, but thanks to Accord, your board is more resilient. You also have Owls, which count as grade 3s on the rear guard, to hit that 4 or more consistently. It's almost to the point that I would consider minimum 3 Fuocks as mandatory for this purpose. Next is Sparare. Auto effect on the front row rearguard circle. When this unit is stood by your Vanguard's ability, Soul Blast 2 to draw a card. Continuous in the back row, however, during your turn, all of your other rearguards in the same column as the unit gets 5k. Sparare is a simple card. In the front row, you can restand him with Accord to get a free draw. Now that Accord doesn't discard, this is a +1 for Soul Blast 2, and Soul seems to be a lot easier than it ever has been nowadays with the deck, thanks to Owl. In the back row as well, he is a permanent 5k booster. Think about it like that. Put him behind the unit that is attacking twice for essentially 2 5k boosts. Sporare is hard to find in many Bastion lists at the moment, and I don't know why. Even now with Owl keeping our soul healthy, I think that Sporare might be a sleeper card, so don't sleep on him. The next 2 cards I'll put together as they fulfill a similar purpose, that being Rondalia and Darkstrain Dragon. Darkstrain has a simple effect. If you have 3 or more grade 3 units, act. Soul Blast 2 and all of your grade 3 rearguards gain boost for the turn. Rondalia is similar but a bit more complex. If we are on Bastion, act. You can Solar in to give our Vanguard the red text. All of your grade 3 rearguards gain boost until end of turn. Also, act while in Soul, you can Soul Blaster and choose one of our grade 3 rearguards and it gets boost until end of turn. So basically, these 2 grade 3s work similar to each other where we look to give boost to our really big bodies. Whereas Darkstrain is able to give boost turn after turn after turn, if the soul accommodates it, a single copy of Rondalia can give a half-assed boost across 2 turns. Ideally, her cost and effects would be reversed to really milk this card, but I think that at this current time, Rondalia is better in context of us having owls that also act as boosters, so giving full board boost to grade 3s isn't as good as filling out missing pieces via Rondalia's second effect. Between these non-mandatory tech cards, I would rank from strongest to weakest would be Fuock, Sajess, Sporare, Rondalia, then Darkstrain. Fuock for the aforementioned reasons that A, it's a +1 since you draw to replace itself and the extra drive is the +1. B, more drive checks equals more yellow cards equals more shield equals more damage equals... Next, Sajess for the information that he provides, but also can bridge in the edge cases where you need that little more push to push past the trigger offensively or defensively. In my opinion though, the information is the most important part about this card. Thirdly, Sporare for his 2-in-1 effects. Be it digging or boosting, he's never dead on the board, but also helps in magic numbers, which I will dive deeper onto after such. And finally, the 2 boost enablers. As stated before, now that we have owls, boost is less of an issue. Now that we have Grinder Edge Dragon, who is already fat as fuck by himself, boost is lesser of an issue there. If you want to be funny and do funny double Grinder Edge columns on a Bastion Prime turn, be my guest. I've done it before. I laughed as my opponent took 2 PGs worth of damage, but I think the power is already there enough though through the magic numbers we make. And on the topic of magic numbers, because of magic numbers, I think regardless which of the upcoming variants you run, please consider Sporare or Fuock. I think if there's one thing to take away from this video, it should be this part. This will win you games if you understand this. So to reiterate once again, shield values in D format are piddly, except for triggers, which are on average 15k, save for unique cases. Most decks are running 8 crits because crits win games. So most decks are running 8 15k shields. The 2 magic numbers then to look for are 28k, which forces a trigger to tie and then an extra card to guard, as well as 43k, which forces 2 triggers to tie and then an extra card to guard. For 28k, that's very easy. Grinder Edge plus Bastion Accord reaches that simply through Grinder's own 10k buff alongside Accord's 5k buff. Now for 43k, Grinder Edge plus Bastion Accord plus Persona Ride only reaches 38k. So where do we make up for that missing 5k? Enter Fuock for the 5k buff for the turn, or Sporare for the continual 5k buff. On the turns that you Persona Ride, and you can make Grinder Edge 43k, more times than not, you will be pushing your opponent to near death or ripping out all of their PGs if they had time to find them, as it's just not viable on a player's hand to 3-card guard twice to still deal with a Vanguard swing as well as another rearguard swing, and this is before your second Grinder Edge performance stripe checks. Remember kids, 28k, 43k. Now, I put the deck list at the very end so that all the net deckers are forced to watch the previous segments. If you made it this far, thank you very much. If you skip forward to this part, fuck you, shame on you, go back to the beginning and give me the ad revenue I deserve. Or don't, I'm just a talking voice with no tops because I get COVID on tournament weekends. So I will be introducing 4 variants of Bastion Accord, from worst to best in my opinion, and once again I leave the best for last, so all you filthy net deckers are forced to give me my ad revenue. We've gotten familiar with our new friends, we've refamiliarized ourselves with our old friends, and we've talked about why cards are better than others. Let's put together what we've learned and make ourselves a beautiful pile of 50 cards. First off, we have Persona Ride Spam Bastion. This deck plays off of the fact that Bastion Accord shares the name as Apex ruler Bastion, to be able to consistently and constantly Persona Ride turn after turn after turn. Going through the list, we have 4 Bastion Accords, including the one in our ride line, 3 Apex rulers, 2 primes, 1 4-bit surrogate, 4 Gronder Edge as per mandatory, 4 Aldens as per mandatory, 4 Fuocks, 4 Sapien Owls as per mandatory, 1 copy of Topaz, we'll talk about that later, 4 Perfect Guards, 1 of the Eidos Fare overtrigger, which I believe to be the strongest overtrigger for Bastion, as it lets you recycle Bastion names for more Persona rides and or discards for Accord, but also it is a 9th crit, which lets us break rules, and breaking rules is awesome. The rest of the trigger lineup is going to be standard across the other list here. We were running 4 Blade Feather Dragons, 4 of the Hello Happy World Hogami crits because she is too cute to not run, 3 Purorobi draws, 4 heals. We run Circling Sorceress vanilla heals because consistency in shield value is better than niche 1-ups that you won't draw into, and also she has twin tails and that is kawaii. On the topic of draws, they are strictly better than fronts because you want to draw into Bastion names, but also a draw can draw into a crit, which becomes a total of 25k shield, whereas a front is only 20k shield. Cringe. Then we take a look into the ride line, and it is fairly standard for Bastion, except for the grade 1, which we have swapped out for Incision Angel instead of Fort. Incision Angel lets us draw and drop when rolled upon. It's a simple but sweet effect. The reason why we are running Incision Angel is that we run 5 orders between Fuock and 4-bit, and ripping one of those off of Fort is wanting to commit on life, whereas Incision Angel lets us draw into these really strong orders. You'll come to find that Fort becomes a liability, as calling triggers off of a skill means that you're not checking it, and that means you don't have 15k shield in hand. The 2 new cards that we never discussed is the Regulus Piece 4-bit Surrogate and Yellow Jeweled Beast Topaz. 4-bit Surrogate may as well be a mandatory card in Bastion Accord too, now that I think about it. You can search your deck or drop for up to a total of 2 grade 3 or 4 unit cards with different card names and reveal them. Call all the grade 3s to rear and put all the revealed grade 4s to hand. Shuffle if you search the deck. So what does 4-bit do? First, we can deck in by 2. Awesome. We can pull out Alden and Grander to immediately make our ideal attacking board. Secondly, it can act as a 5th copy of either name, being able to revive them from drop if you've gone through all 4 copies of each. And third, it can be a way to prepare Bastion Prime to go for the finisher turn. The other card is Topaz. When placed on rear or guardian circle, you can return to your ride deck 2 cards from either your soul or your drop zone to perform one of the effects based on the circle it was placed on. If rearguard, you can check top 5 to superior call a unit that is your Vanguard's grade or less. If it's outside your main phase, however, rest it, but that doesn't matter in the context of Bastion. If you put on the Guardian Circle, this unit gains 15k shield to become a 20k shield total. It's a dual modal card which has its benefit, but can only realistically be used once per game. You also don't want to draw into it before you've soul blasted your ride deck pieces, but similar to 4-bit, can act as a 5th copy of Owl, Alden, or Grander Edge, and itself adding some good shield value to the deck. So, to once again comment on the deck, you're looking to abuse the fact that Accord shares the same name as Apex to be able to perform Persona rides turn after turn after turn, and you'll be getting 4 attacks with the Persona ride buff. Because you'll be spending most of your game on grade 3, riding in between either grade 3 Bastion, Fuock will very much be live more often than not, and that's why we see 4 this time around. Between trading out Bastion names for a cycle every turn and constantly resolving Fuocks, we'll be performing a lot of drive checks and hopefully be seeing and showing more triggers than our opponent. The main thing to keep note of is when playing into decks that do look to touch your board, such as Seraph, where autopiloting and Persona riding into Apex just for the Persona ride buff will turn off Accord's resist and leave you susceptible to having your front row picked apart. I think this is the weakest variant of Accord at the moment because you are also susceptible to breaking. With only 2 attack and rear guards in Grander Edge and Alden, there can be turns where you are just unable to keep up the same amount of pressure that is required in this current game state. Persona riding into Apex, I feel, is also sometimes weaker than just staying on Accord and getting an extra 2 drives, and in that case, it's better to run more primes so that it's always ready for the ride and slam for game. The next deck I will introduce is a more vanilla, more consistent, higher floor, lower ceiling. Your shittier games will be less shitty, but your best games will be less hog. This is the unit-focused variant of Bastion Accord, and we have reintroduced Fort into our ride line to respect such. In this version of Bastion, there are very few dead hands as every grade 3 we draw can attack. However, we drive check less due to the lack of Fuock, and one less drive check can mean one less yellow card, and that is sad face. Once again, across the top 20 cards we see our 4 mandatory staples: 4 Accords, 4 Primes, 4 Sapient Owls, 4 Grander Edge, and 4 Alden. The other common cards between the lists are the 4 PGs, our 9 crits, including the Idosphere OT, which is our ideal overtrigger of choice always, 3 draws, and our 4 vanilla heals. This time around, I've chosen to run 4 Sajess and 3 Sporare in lieu of Fuocks and other techs. As stated before, Sporare's 5k buff can play that important role of getting Grander Edge to 43k, but if we've drawn the wrong side of our deck, Sporare can also be restood with Accord to get a draw into hopefully more defensive cards or our better attackers. I chose 4 Sajess in this list, since we are missing that one drive check that Fuock provides. Sajess being that 10k shield to negate one trigger's power can come up, but also 4 Sajess so that if it does get called off of 4 Superior Call skill, both of his effects are live without needing to be grade 3. It's also really funny to see your opponent attacking the Sajess at a 1-2 pass, hit the trigger, but Sajess becomes 23k because they triggered. Remember that. At the bottom there, I have also included Rondalia and Darkstrain Dragon, but between Sporare and Owls, I felt that the deck had enough boosting and pseudo boosting that they were not required at this point in time. As for how this version of Bastion plays, it's very aggressive. As stated, you're always going to have your front row, quantity over quality however, and as you run the playset of primes, you're always immediately ready to slam down the prime ride to go for game. Sporare's Soul Blast 2 cost also feels very forgiving when you have Sajess and Owl charging the soul for you as well, but as per normal, the goal is to deal as much damage with Grander Edge and draw as many cards with Alden. The next 2 decks are what I feel are the best way to play Bastion going forward. The main body of both decks are the same, but the differences are in the ride line. So I'll have the decks flip-flop between each other for you all to see, but this is the Fuock Sajess variant of Bastion, and this is what I believe is the best way to play Bastion is going to be. So the only difference between these 2 decks is the ride line. As we are once again running orders, Fort is a liability, so in one version of the deck, we re-invite Incision Angel on a business trip from Grand Grace into Bastion. To remind everyone, Incision Angel lets us draw and drop when rode upon. This will allow us to draw into our powerful order cards instead of flipping them off the top and negging them and crying. The other ride line uses the Blaster ride line, Wingle Brave, Maron, and Blaster Dark. For those unfamiliar, the idea is that when you ride Blaster Dark over Maron, because you have no other blasters in deck, you're going to be superior calling Wingle Brave from Soul. You'll usually superior call it to the back row center because you want your owls on the side columns, but that's for another time. This doesn't neg you your orders firstly, and secondly gets you a +1 to board through Wingle Brave. Then, when you've rode into Blaster Dark as well, you can counterblast 1 to retire that Wingle Brave you called, retire one of your opponent's rear guards, and this unit gains a drive for the turn. Remember what we said earlier in the video. More drive checks equals more triggers equals more win. But that +1 drive check is also a draw 1 that could do another damage, so we could find our power orders off of this as well. I'm currently of the opinion that Incision and Rooks is stronger as you can preserve your counterblast for Alden and Accord and Fuock, but I recognize that in a more aggressive meta where people are going to be aggressing you heavily on grade 1 and grade 2, Blaster Dark will always be better to be able to get those like 2-for-1s and also get that early conversion, potentially drive check early heals, where that early damage is wasted. Prattling off the top of the list, and once again we have our 20 staples: 4 Accord, 4 Prime, 4 Owl, 4 Grander Edge, 4 Alden, our beloveds. Then into our common line, once again, 4 PGs, 9 crits including our blue OT, 3 draws, and 4 heals. Then in our flex slots, we run 3 Sajess, 3 Fuocks, and 1 Forbidal. This is kind of a hybrid of the prior 2 decks that we saw earlier, but instead of Forbidal being used to prep Bastion Prime, it is used to secure a board to attack with between Grander, Sajess, and Alden. Similarly, every turn we play an order, we've gone +1, regardless which one. Sajess gives us valuable information, and Fuock gives us the extra drive checks we need to flip more yellows than our opponents. There's not much else to really talk about the cards that I haven't said before. The main thing is the ratio of cards between our 7 flex choices, but I believe that this ratio is correct. Yours truly. Once again, we look to aggress our opponent with Alden Grander lines, calling owls to the side back rows, and closing out the game with Bastion Prime, being able to withstand said owls as well as provide 10k then 20k boost to our massive front power lines. When our game plan is also more focused on Bastion Prime as the finisher, that's where Sajess shines as well. Being able to confirm a grade 3 on top or to push your trigger into soul to get to that 4th potential grade 3 is also very key. We only play on certainties. As for the common gameplay flow, it very much plays on my philosophy of guard while you can. If you don't know what that is, check out the video right there. Clicked it? Okay, let's continue. So, as often as Gordon Ramsay curses, you will hear me say early game is where guarding is the easiest, so guard there. Trigger compression is at its lowest, numbers are at its lowest, so stay as low as you can before your opponent hits grade 3 and blasts you to infinity and beyond. Once you're given a bolus dose of counterblast, that's when you can convert it all at once into immediate plussing. Counterblast 2, Alden, draw, call 2, call owl, countercharge 1, activate Fuock, draw 1, accord, post drive checks, discard a name to gain another drive check 2. I think the flow of converting guaranteed counterblast is better than converting unneeded counterblast. This also makes your heals worth infinitely more. The grade 3 turn onwards depends on how much counterblast you have, but going first, if you have no counterblast, a simple Grander plus Accord 3 attack turn saves hand and also does way too much damage. If you only have one counterblast and need to choose between Fuock or Accord's extra drive checks, it is better to Fuock if you have the 4 units, as this not only lets you keep a Bastion in hand for potential follow-up, Persona rides, or Prime rides, but also opens the line of drawing into Owl, which could potentially also give you the counter charge needed to also turn on Accord's extra drive check. That's awesome. Otherwise, if you cannot meet the 4 grade 3 units, the drive check is more stable off of Accord's effect. If you have 2 counterblasts, your choice of counterblast usage widens between Alden, Fuock, and Accord. This depends on your hand, namely if you have a Sapient alongside Alden. If you do, you 100% call Alden first and then call Owl for the countercharge 1. Whether you Fuock or Accord with the last counterblast also depends on your hand once again. Some things to consider is you have another Owl in hand and Prime in hand as your only discard target. If that is the last Prime in your deck now in your hand, I would Fuock to maintain Prime double Owl endboard on the turn after. If you know you have Prime still in deck, I would go for the Accord double twin drive check to dig for it while putting on pressure, but also keeping Fuock for the upcoming turn, that if you did draw into Prime, you still get Prime double Owl Fuock for a quad drive Prime turn. Sajess should never be a consideration for using his counterblast because it's so low impact. Unless you're breaking through a double or triple or an over defensive trigger or going for game, even if you have the option to overscale a defensive trigger, I think it's better to keep that counterblast open to open up more lines the turn after. Turn 3 is your first Accord turn. Turn 4 can either be Persona ride or Prime ride depending on what the situation calls for. If your first Accord turn hits them to 4 damage and their drive checks on the turn back were piss weak, a Prime ride can kill, and if not, it should cripple them to the point that the next turn should finish them off. If your turn 4 was a Persona ride and you did not win that turn, your turn 5 must be Prime. You should be going for game at that point. You must have double Owl and you must have at least 1 Grander to close out the game. Your ideal final turn end board should be Prime, Grander, triple Owl, plus Fuock. One of the Owls should have been played this turn to get the counter charge to allow for Fuock and other counterblasting requiring skills, such as potentially a Sajess over one of the Granders. But what this gets you is 5 attacks with Bastion Prime being able to restand the grade 3 and Owl column to turn it into a boosted plus 20k column, and if Fuock is able to resolve fully, which it should because Owls count as grade 3 on the boards, we get a 23k Bastion pre-boost swinging with quad drive. Consider if it is the very last turn, even calling the over trigger from hand to boost for 28k to make magic numbers if need be too. You're going for game, no need to hold back. As for mulliganing, consider holding a trigger or 2 for mulligan so you can guard their grade 1 and grade 2 attack, but the cards you want to mulligan for are of course, Grander and Alden. The rest will come naturally. Seeing Grander and opening lets you mulligan more aggressively, as you don't need to reveal grade 3s until you go into Bastion for rooks. Finally, attack order. Don't restand Alden. Choose to restand Grander Edge. If there's another thing to learn from this video, it's this. Restanding Grander Edge with Accord has inherent more value than Alden because swinging 28k twice is swinging with magic numbers twice, whereas swinging with Alden right after is an easy guard than a magic number. Yes, in the end, you still get the same amount of attacks with the same amount of power, 2 attacks at 28, 1 attack at 23. But the fact that you're swinging big first forces your opponent to that decision where they are going to be forced to take that damage. And even if they do get a defensive trigger, that 23k Alden is going to be able to still hit, and that makes Alden a magic number into defensive triggers. So think about it like that. Normally, yes, it is better to swing smaller to largest, but because you're performing 4 drive checks as well, chances are you do find a trigger to pass on to Alden, which will then make his attack a better value. As for some final commentary as to how the deck looks to be, truth be told, the deck will be very good for the DBT-12 format, but immediately once DBT-13 hits, and we're facing the likes of Youthberg Blast, Jardul Ignis, and Leonor Vivace, Bastion will quickly fall off, but in the interim between then, I think Bastion still holds very strong. The deck has one major weakness across all variants, and that is not being able to draw Alden, which is why even if you were to call Alden off of force effects, if you did not have the counterblast for it, you're not getting the draw too. Which is why the Incision Angel Wildline is better because it lets you draw Alden and have it in hand for when you do have the counterblast. Also, despite how many grade 3s the deck runs now, it is also deceptively tanky. Grander Edge's 10k shield, Sajess' 10k shield, we now have Owls which are also 5k shields. We draw and drive check so much between Alden, Fuock, and Accord that we're bound to see triggers. And with that, I think I have expent every living brain cell I have with regards to Bastion Accord. And if by the end of this video, you do not know Bastion Accord like the back of your hand, either I or you have failed you. Probably you. I'm perfect. Whether you are piloting the deck or playing against the deck, I really do hope that this video showed you the in and outs of the deck, the important pieces, the weak points, how to play against it, how to play as it, why the deck looks like it does, what the deck wants to do, and what each card looks to do in the deck. As stated before, Bastion Accord looks to be one of the meta contenders coming out of DBT-12. Its grade 3 turns going first and second are both fearsome in both punishing and pushing back. Bastion Accord has single-handedly provided himself with the support he needed. The ability to maintain board presence, cross turn, and Grander Hedge is one hell of a creative card. Sapient Owl provides the deck with much needed resource management, but also helps in making larger numbers as a booster without the needless additions of Dark Trade or Rondalia. Unfortunately, the deck looks to fall off with the foreboding release of DBT-13, but I think with the change in playstyle, it can still present results. But with that, we've come to a conclusion. Thank you so much for reaching the end of the video, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. It feels good to talk seriously about Vanguard for once, and I generally do love teaching others what I've learned about the game and a deck. Bastion has been near and dear to my heart since its inception, and with the Bastion Accord, I think I've finally found my place in Standard. If you enjoyed what you watched or listened, and if you learned anything new today, I would love to see some in the comments down below. Or let me know through liking the video and sharing with your play group and others you think who would want to learn more about Bastion Accord. I put in way too much time than was required for this, but I really want others to understand why I see the deck the way I do. And if you haven't already, do consider subscribing. Positive feedback is my love language. In any case, this has been Token from Yellow Card TCG, and I will see you next time.